Hi, welcome to Bad Music Case and Other Ways to Ruin Your Life. My name is Dominic.
Hi, my name is Sam. Dominic has our record this week.
This week's record is Division in the Heartland by the Bruce Lee Band. This record came out in 2021, and this copy is an original pressing. Anyways, today we're talking to Kevin Tit of Saffron, The Hard Times, and Up the Blunks. How's it going, Kevin?
Doing well. How are y'all?
Good.
Good.
So you write for The Hard Times, of course, but how did you start writing for The Hard Times?
I submitted a few times. It took a while, but after I'd say a year and a half, I got in. And I don't have a writing background, so it took a long time for me to learn the formula for it. But once I did, it kind of started to flow a little better.
Yeah. Were you doing stand-up before or after The Hard Times?
Well, I was doing stand-up like maybe 8 years before Hard Times. So I had a background in comedy and all that stuff, but as far as like actually writing, that was something that was new to me.
Mm.
Yeah, kind of talking about like your history with that. Was stand-up and like sketch comedy something you'd always wanted to do?
Yeah, well, since I was a kid, I've always loved like Weird Al and just making parodies of stuff. I've always been a fan of silly slapstick comedy movies like Naked Gun and Airplane and the scary movies, all that. I'm just a big fan of ridiculous nonsense. So the older I got, the more I found a way to, harness that and use it for other outlets.
Yeah, I was gonna say we both like really enjoy the hard times, but it's funny you bring up the scary movies because that was something like my mom like raised me on. Like I've watched all of them and it's just the funniest stuff. And I've showed them to my friends and I think they just don't get it because they're like, why is this that funny? Like, why do you enjoy this so much? And I'm like, because it doesn't make sense. Like
It's definitely a time and a place thing. And those movies also, the first two were made by like the Wayans brothers, and then after 3 through I think 5 or whatever were completely different people.
yeah.
So it's shout out to your mom for putting me onto that.
Yeah, and kind of talking about like doing the parodies and whatnot. You voiced Jerry on punk rock Seinfeld. So how'd
Yeah.
you like start doing that?
So that whole project started with me and a couple other Hard Times writers. We all just ended up finding out, oh, we all live near each other. So we would just meet up and hang out. And this idea popped up. I don't remember who had it first, but the 4 of us, Eric, who's pretty much does like all the directing and all the animating. He's an editor at the Hard Times. And then Dan Liberto and Heather Coyne and myself are just writers. And we do, like I do Jerry, Dan does George, and he drew all the characters, and Heather does Elaine. And then we got Brandon Kelly from the Lawrence Arms out in Chicago doing Kramer. And it just we all just happened to be in the Hard Times group, and Eric hit up Brandon, was like, you want to do this? He's like, yeah. And the rest is history.
How long has that been going on for now?
We started it well over a year ago. It's been like a slow burn. It's, every time we get together though, we try to like write or develop new episode ideas. But the first episode took a few months before it actually came out. And then it's been going a little faster since then. There's another one coming out fairly soon, I think within the next month or so.
So just out of curiosity, what was the idea behind Punk House Comedy and how did you kind of get the idea to start it?
Well, I've always loved comedy and I've always loved punk. And after, being all over the place and seeing different shows, like I've done comedy shows in people's houses and I've seen punk shows in people's houses. So I thought, why not try to combine the two? And I had a lot of different formulas for it. And most of them didn't work well because a lot of people don't like to be quiet during shows. And especially if you've never been to a comedy show, you don't know the etiquette. So it was hard figuring out the right formula, but I realized that starting the show with the band playing one song and then doing an hour of comedy and then bringing the band back to do a whole set tends to be the only way that show will work.
Yeah, I could see how like the crowds kind of for like a house show as opposed to like a comedy house show would be a little bit different. So I was just wondering, yeah, like you said.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole thing with like people like if you're at a show and there's like 5 bands on it, after the first band, everyone wants to talk to their friends, you know, catch up, talk about the set or talk about God knows what. And then when the band starts playing again, it's a little too loud to have a full conversation. So you kind of just pay attention to the band. With comedy, if you're not really there for comedy or paying attention to the comedian, it's easy to just find yourself in a conversation that's way above the volume of the person performing. And then that's always, you know, no fun. No one ever wants to yell at someone and say, hey, shut up. You can't talk because I'm talking. You know?
Yeah.
So to avoid all that mess, I think the formula that we got now is the way to go about it.
So a few months ago, Saffron played a show with the Ergs. So I was just wondering how the show came about.
Really, we got a DM, I think, on Instagram from Jeff, the guitar player, asking if we wanted to play the show like 6 months before it. And we hadn't really been doing anything because, you know, the pandemic and all. So we were just like, sure, yeah, let's do it. And we were pumped, like, because we're all big fans of the Ergs. So we were like, we have 6 months to practice and get our whole thing together and figure out the band again. And it worked. I'd say it worked well. I mean, we're now, you know, playing more shows again, booking shows out of town, have new songs. We're ready to record. So, yeah, it all started with a DM over Instagram, and it kind of got the fuel back in the engine.
Yeah, some new songs were played at that show, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Were you guys at that show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, I was gonna say we went for the Ergs, but you know, we got to see your set too, and we were like, these guys are cool. We were like, we like this.
Right on. Appreciate it.
So
how did you guys get into the Ergs? Sorry. Yeah.
Oh no, you're fine.
How did y'all find out about them?
I don't know.
I feel like I found out like mostly through Dom as well, because
I'm trying to figure out how so my dad at his like work, he has a whole wall of like random pictures he's printed out, and there was a picture of him in a car with Mikey Erg. And when I was like super little, I was like, who is that? It was like, oh, that's Mikey Erg from the Ergs. All right, and just started listening to him. He was like, yeah, that's when we shared a cab. It was like, all right.
Cool.
Yeah. And like when we started the podcast, we kind of talked about like more bands we both knew. So I think I just kind of found out about them through that. But no, they were great. I mean, that was such a cool show. I honestly, I was embarrassed because I have like my biggest tattoo on my body is an Ergs tattoo. And I was like, I got to cover that up. If I'm going to be on stage, I can't be showing that.
Yeah, Mikey Erg was one of our like first interviews like 2 years ago. And he's like standing by the merch table and we start talking to him. And he was like, it all starts to like flood back. He's like, wait a minute. Wait. He was like, we did an interview, like, yeah, and it was funny just seeing it like all slowly come back.
Yeah.
So kind of talking about interviews, you run a podcast called Up the Blunks, but how did this come about?
Up the Blunks started during the pandemic. Hard Times was trying to, you know, build their podcast network out, and they asked if I had any ideas, and I thought, well, I got nothing but downtime. So I thought, why not do this podcast? I had Akil in mind, who's the singer of a band called End It out of Baltimore, because I had seen them play like a year or two before the idea ever came up. And I thought he was the funniest person on the planet. And so I just hit him up and say, hey, you want to do this thing? And he was like, yeah. And then we met up. And the first episode, I think, was the first time we were ever in a room together. And since then, we've just been doing it.
Yeah, we were friends like before the pandemic started, but I think like starting the podcast was a huge part of like, you know, talking more. And I don't want to say we wouldn't have started it if it weren't for the pandemic, but I feel like it wouldn't have been in its entirety. Because we kind of, like you said, we had this time on our hands and we were like, sure, you know, like,
yeah.
And being that everybody, you know, we want to do something with music, people weren't going on tours, and it was a way to like get their name out there and, you know, be able to talk about whatever they were involved in. So I think it was the timing definitely came together. How, you know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I personally have been looking at the whole pandemic as kind of like almost in like this weird way, like a new Renaissance period, because people are forced to do things that are unconventional because all the regular stuff is shut down. So like, well, if you're going to do something, you got to be creative about it. You got to figure it out, whether it's, you know, if it's a podcast. I feel like video podcasts really started to blow up during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And a lot of interesting new things that are still, I think, the norm, even though things are opening up again. I think there's things that came out of it that are just going to be the standard here on out.
Yeah, and like talking about End It for a second. End It's one of those bands I wanted to like, I don't know, I only recently like heard of them, and it's like you see pictures from the set and the noise looks insane. I saw pictures from a set they did at the Fillmore a few weeks ago, and somebody was like, you know, it's a boring show when he keeps his clothes on. Because I saw stuff from like Disturbing the Peace because a few of my friends were there. I was like, oh, that's funny.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, Fillmore is so huge and it's not intimate. It's hard to be as intimate and catch the same energy that you're used to. So I could see that.
Yeah, we went there not that, like, I feel like a couple months ago it was. And I mean, I obviously didn't expect it to be super small, but I was like, this is like a lot bigger. Like there was a lot of room left. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. The Fillmore, it's a venue. It's it's fancy. I went, I forget which band it was, but I ended up in the green room once over there. And I just saw like a bunch of the stuff that was on the band's rider. And they had like a bunch of Beyond burgers just available for bands to just cook up and eat. There's like an oxygen tank available for people. It's like, this is like some professional level stuff here.
Yeah, right. Like it's put together and everything.
Yeah.
I'm going to the Fillmore in, I think it's June, to see Avail with Frank Turner.
Okay.
Cool. Avail is just, I don't even know how to describe it. It's Avail.
Yeah, it'll be a fun show.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. This was a lot of fun.
Not a problem. Appreciate y'all having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much. No problem.
Cool. All right. Well, take it easy.